Or do you want to? Okay. So here we are at our January 13th, 2025 Forest Resilience Task Force meeting. We are now called to order. First bullet on our first agenda item is to establish a quorum. I'm pretty sure we have hit that bucket, but please let me know if I'm incorrect. Next one is just to review the agenda. Are there any comments or concerns with the agenda as written? Okay, we'll consider it adopted. I know we didn't go through roll call. I will say I am joined in the room by Noah, our newest appointee, and it just kind of behooves me. I don't know. Noah, do you want to introduce yourself to the full crew before we get rolling?
Sure. Yeah, I met some of you on the Climate Informed Management Subcommittee on Friday, but my name is Noah Dudley. I work for the Department of Natural Resources as a state land geologist. Part of the area I cover is state lands in Whatcom County, which is part of why I'm here today. Thanks for having me, and looking forward to meeting more of you.
All right. So move on to the next bullet. We've got review and approve the November 14th meeting summary. I think there were a few edits that Brandy had made. If those minutes look good, I'd entertain a motion to approve as written. Anyone?
I move to approve the minutes as written.
We got a motion in the room. Brandy, you have a comment?
I just wanted to clarify that I did not rewrite that section. That section is the same as it was in the last set of minutes that were brought to the task force.
Was it supposed to be rewritten, or is it in good shape now?
No, I had said that it wasn't accurate and that I had asked if Triangle could go back to their records and more accurately reflect the report, but they weren't able to do it and I wasn't able to do it either.
Kate or Melanie, did you all take a look at that, or?
Yeah, we had asked for some direction. I sent an email or two asking for more specifically what we were looking for, and didn't hear back. So I agree with what Brandy said. It's the same as what was originally circulated. There were some changes though from Oliver. So there are changes from the last version, but Oliver made those changes.
Gotcha. Very good. If you're talking, Barry, we can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear you call my name. So I read these a while ago, and it seemed to me we had a discussion. Commissioner Stremler had raised the issue of, this is a different issue than what you're talking about now. But he raised the issue of best available science and how that was going to be determined, and whose reports we were going to take and whose we were going to reject. And I didn't see it in the minutes when I read them that I had stated that there was, a great deal of literature on the methods of determining best available science as well as best science under the Shoreline Act and the Critical Area Ordinance. And that was run through court for Whatcom County on their Shoreline Master Program and Critical Area Ordinance when they were approved last time. And so I just wanted to make clear that the question about best available science is answered both in the history of the county and ecology, as well as in Superior Court in Skagit County.
Yeah, thanks, Barry. Yeah, there is some mention of Stremler's comment and some of the discussion. Didn't get into the full depth of what you're talking about, but I know Dave and the Triangle team are working on some of the guiding language that's going to go into the plan. So I think we've got that captured in the minutes, and certainly are going to flag that as we get deeper into the plan.
Yeah, well, I raised the point because these minutes are actually important if you get challenged legally, because they'll look at those minutes in court and say, did he address this? and where did they address it, and what was their resolution. And so I just want, and I also I wanted Commissioner Stremler to understand that that's a very well researched, covered, and addressed issue.
So just to clarify, so on page 6 of our packet, that description of that discussion, does that sufficiently address your recollection of what was discussed?
I don't have that in front of me, and I can't get it up here quickly, so I don't think it did. That's why I'm bringing it up.
Okay.
Just said he questioned it, but there wasn't really a response that said, we've got it covered. We're not just making this stuff up.
Can you
Mm.
see my screen, the highlighted portion of my screen?
I can't.
Okay, so you feel like there's additional um, aspects of your comment that you'd like inserted.
Yeah, I can write it up for you if you like.
That would be helpful, and I'll share something with the group that that may help with this. We have this meeting recording, and then what Kate is preparing is a summary. So we are not sharing like a transcript or detailed word for word exactly what is said. The idea is to pull out the key summary of the discussion. So, I think what we're hoping for with your review is if there's like an entire topic that comes up that's not captured in here that you feel is important for the purpose of, of capturing the key points, then that's really key. But we're not preparing like a transcript of exactly everything that's stated. And that's just additional context, Barry. That's not to say that, if there's something that's not captured in here, of course, we want to add it in. But I wanted to share that with the full group of just the purpose of this document.
Yeah, but Melanie, the question is how do we determine if it's actually been an idea has been captured? Because we hear the recordings, so we don't know if there's any. I'm not used to this kind of process. I'm used to much more legal process where you really have to track this stuff really carefully and note it as you're going through it, because you're going to go back to court later and maybe double, to Supreme Court or whatever. So maybe I'm being overly protective that way. And if I am, just say so, and I can revise my approach.
All right, let's see what Oliver's comment is. Go ahead, Oliver.
Yeah, I agree with what Barry is saying. And my recollection is that in my comment, I was clarifying that there's a lot of more recent, what I consider to be best available science available on forest resilience in the face of climate change beyond the so-called approved best available science knowledge base. And so there's been a lot of more recent work done in regard to forest resilience in the face of climate change and the effect of forestry on stream flow that would not be in the body of knowledge that Barry was just mentioning. I do think it's helpful and it's consistent with that November meeting that Barry did mention the need to at least incorporate by reference the state's sanctioned best available science knowledge base.
Right. Well, I'm going to propose that we hold these meeting minutes for one more meeting, address Brandy's outstanding comments, address Barry's comments, and then bring them back at our next meeting. Brandy, you have a comment?
Thank you for that. And I just would like to clarify, since we're going to do that, if my request was that Triangle go back to the record and more accurately summarize the report, because it's the summary that's not accurate. That's and asked if Triangle would do that and not put subcommittee members in the position of having to do that. If we can have a conversation offline about that original messaging from the last meeting, that would be great, Melanie and Kate.
Brandy, if you could just share which report you're referencing, that would be helpful.
Yeah, it's the Stewardship and Land Use Subcommittee report.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Noah, are you okay retracting your motion. We're gonna postpone these
Sure.
minutes.
I'm more than okay with that.
All right, so cancel that motion. Moving on to our December 9th meeting summary. Have folks had a chance to review the meeting 9th summary? Any concerns or comments? If not, appreciate a motion to approve as written. Brandy, go ahead.
I beg your pardon. I thought we were talking about the September minutes. I beg your pardon. I think it's the September minutes, not the October minutes that, Kate and Melanie, let's talk offline about which of those minutes it was that there was a problem with the stewardship and land use subcommittee report. I'm getting confused now.
I believe it was the November minutes, Brandy, and now we're talking about the December minutes.
Okay.
I'd move approval of the December minutes.
Thank you, Carl. Seconds out there?
Second,
Thank you, Ellen. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
I,
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, updates and announcements. Triangle team, you all have any updates or announcements?
Nothing on the, is Kirsten there in the room with you, Chris?
She is not.
Okay. Then in Kirsten's absence, I'll just remind everybody that we do still have a vacancy on the task force for a community member with expertise in relevant science disciplines. And just encouraging if you have folks that you are connected to or have ideas or recommendations for an individual to fill that role, just to pass the information along. The information on how to submit an application is on the task force website.
I think the only update I can think of, I know Wacom Conservation District's having their native plant sale currently, and I believe the Wacom Farm Family Forestry Association is about to have their tree sale opening up, I think, next week. So those of you looking to plant more trees, opportunities are coming. Any other updates or announcements from task force members? Okay, let's keep on rolling. Public comment period. I cannot see who's in the waiting room. We don't have any public members present, but just a quick reminder, if there is anyone, public comments are limited to 2 minutes, and you can also submit your comments in writing on the task force website. But raise your hand if you're interested in making a comment. Kate, do we have anybody?
We do have Kaya Hayes in the waiting room, but it doesn't look like they are raising their hand to speak. Let's see.
All right,
Okay.
keep on rolling. So next up, we have review the work plan schedule. I'll pass that over to you, Kate.
All right. Thanks, Chris. And Melanie, would you mind pulling that up on the screen? Thank you. Okay, so just briefly, folks, we keep this on the agenda just as a place for us to take a pause and make sure that we see where we've been and know where we're going in our overall work plan. So the work plan schedule is on page 14 of your meeting packet. And Melanie's going to pull it up on the screen for us. There it is. And as she does that, I'll just give you a brief update on where we are with our community survey. There it is. So our community survey was launched on December 6th, I believe. And no, excuse me, December 9th. We had originally decided to close the survey at the beginning of January. We did decide to just keep it open for another about week and a half. And I wrote to you all about a week and a half ago, giving that that update that the survey will be open until January 17th. So if you all have not had a chance to kind of reach out to your networks, or if you'd like to ping people again, you still have the opportunity to send around the community survey to your networks, and we appreciate that work. So far, we've received 334 responses on the survey, so we're feeling pretty great about that, and that's thanks to the work of this group, as well as Melanie and myself have been kind of doing some strategic promotion to groups in Whatcom County, and then Whatcom County communications staff have been taking a major lead on promotion of the survey to the county's kind of existing newsletters, Facebook, all of the kind of typical communication outlets that they use. So feeling great about that. And the survey will close on Friday, and we'll have more of a kind of brief results look likely at our February meeting, just pending how full our agenda is for that meeting. So that's where we are with the survey. And you can see that up on the screen there in January. And then in terms of plan development, of course, we came away from our last meeting with a list of 9 approved goals, and that was through really great work from this group, the folks who joined us in person, as well as those who joined us online. So thanks for your work doing that. And the purpose of our meeting today is to really complete that process. So there were a handful of additional goal statements that we need to review as a group and decide to approve or not. So that's what we'll be focusing on today. And then moving forward, our work will continue with revising and developing objective statements, which is work that, of course, you all have really already started with your subcommittee meetings. So we'll be moving into February, our February meeting, hoping to review your revised objective statements as they come out of your subcommittee meetings next month. So that's where we're headed. The only other thing that I'll flag from kind of a plan development perspective, right? We, Triangle, as well as Chris and Dave, have been working simultaneously to finish drafting kind of the background section of the plan. So these are the policy background section, and then an overall forest assets review that Dave's been working on. And so those will be pieces of the plan that we'll be looking for initial review from you all later in February. Are there any questions on where we're headed or where we've been? Steve, I see your hand, so go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Just with regard to the survey, you say you have 330 some responses, which is good. Do you have any preliminary idea of where these come from? In other words, who the respondents are so far, and what sectors we might push in the next 4 days that are underrepresented?
Yeah, that's a great question, Steve. And that's kind of the work that Melanie and I have been doing in our goal as we extend the survey. So I would say, just like off the cuff, we've gotten certainly more responses from folks representing recreation interests in the county, and a little less from what we might call like forest industry, forest management. So if there's any kind of emphasis or specific groups that you all are connected with that you think should see the survey, I'd encourage you to reach out to those folks.
Well, what about environmentalist groups, which is not necessarily the same as recreation interest?
Could you rephrase the question for me, Steve?
Well, you said you had a lot of responses from recreation interest, but I'm asking about environmentalist interest because they aren't necessarily the same.
Right, okay. I would say we can't pull that level of detail out of the survey at this point, just based on the questions that we're asking. So folks identify themselves as, you know, falling into a handful of categories, and that one's not specifically called out, so it's hard to say.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, and then I think Frank, that's your hand, so go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I was just wondering, I was asked to provide a contact person from the Northwest Indian College to respond to that survey, and I sent over Emma. I can't recall her last name now, but I identified her. I gave her address, and I was just wondering if you happen to hear back from her, and if not, I can get a hold of her and chat to her between now and Friday.
Yeah, Frank, really appreciate that. Thanks for shooting Emma's email address over. I did send her an email last week, and I don't believe I've heard back from her. So it would be great if you could connect with her.
Great. Okay, I'll do that either this afternoon or tomorrow. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Frank. Any other questions, folks?
Yeah, I had one more, which is I did send them to some faculty members at Western Washington, and I wondered if you'd had a response from there, because some of them said that they had in fact answered, but I wondered if you had very many, or if they'd gotten them to their students in their classes.
So we did share it with Western, and I appreciate you sending it to specific faculty members as well. In terms of responses, again, it's hard to like parse out if we've had specific responses as a result of that communication. I haven't heard specific word back from Western on whether or not they've shared it, but it sounds like, Steve, the faculty that you connected with had already seen the survey. Is that right?
Some of them had, at least, yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Sure.
And Oliver, I see your hand.
Yeah, thanks for the summary on the status of the report. I'm just curious that I think back in November, Triangle sent out a request for the task force to look at the outline one last time. And I provided some comments, and I think Triangle said that you would park those comments until the plan is more fully developed, but it sounds like it's the earlier section being developed. And I was just curious to know how far into writing the report will Triangle get before we have a chance to, say, look at a revision to the outline. In other words,
good question.
Being narcissistic, how will I know if my comments are being addressed in the report?
No, very fair question, Oliver. Yes, you're right. We did ask for kind of like a final comment on the outline after we had incorporated the majority of revisions from this group in November. So those were incorporated in the outline, or you heard from us specifically, which is what Oliver is speaking to. And really those comments that we were talking to you about, Oliver, were just at the level of detail that we aren't quite at with the sections of the plan that we're working on. So you all will see these sections that we're working on with Dave and with Chris in February. And so that'll be, of course, your opportunity to provide additional comment. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. Thank you very much for that clarification.
Yeah. Okay, folks, any other questions before we moved on? Great.
Okay. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you. Okay.
Pass it on. Triangle keeps going. Continue to review and adopt plan goals.
Thank you, Kate, and thanks all. I hope everyone's doing well, and it's good to see you all, and it was great to see many of you in person in December. So just a reminder of where we left things. We all had a great discussion on goals that you all worked with your subcommittees on developing. And out of that conversation, as Kate noted, there were 9 goals that you all adopted after going through edits as a full group. As part of your meeting packet, Kate shared the 5 draft goals that came out of the Stewardship and Land Use Subcommittee that still need to be discussed, that you all flagged with some edits. And then there were also 4 new goals that were drafted during our last meeting that we'll discuss as a group today. So we've got our 9 adopted goals, and then we have 9 draft goals that we're going to go through a discussion process. I am going to share my screen with the mural that we used during our last meeting, and we're just going to go through these one at a time, reviewing the edits that you all who participated in the process noted on the mural, and then we'll workshop the goal statements, and then hopefully we'll come away with a certain number, maybe it's 9, maybe it's fewer, or maybe it's more, of goal statements that we're ready to adopt into the final list of adopted goal statements. Before I share my screen, any questions from anybody on where we left things at our last meeting and what we're going to do together today? Noah, I know these are new, so just let us know, pause at any point if you have any questions at any point about any of these statements. I'm hoping you had a chance to review them in your meeting packet.
I have, yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, okay, great. All right, let me share my screen. And Zoom's being a little funky for me. I think things are okay now. I got booted out, but I'm back. So just let me know if something's not looking right. I'll have Kate come tap me on the shoulder. Okay, so let's start in the upper left-hand corner here. These, as a reminder, the statements in blue are the draft goal statements, and these are as were written by the Stewardship and Land Use Subcommittee. These purple and yellow stickies are comments that other task force members made during our last meeting when we had individual kind of thought and reflection time to think about these goals and any questions that people had or suggested revisions for them. So the draft goal statement is written is to retain and increase forest and tree canopy cover. And I'm just going to start left to right with some of the comments that were raised. So there is a suggestion, could simply add to this where ecologically appropriate. I think that's supposed to be appropriate, maybe not appropriated. Are there any thoughts on this suggested edit to the goal statement? And I know it feels like a long time ago now, but maybe whoever wrote this remembers what they were thinking. If this was a suggestion to add this to the end of the goal statement, that's how I'm reading it. Any thoughts or reactions?
I think I suggested that simply because some wetlands and other ecological, types, ecosystem types aren't necessarily supposed to be treed.
Okay, excuse any typos. Retain and increase forest and tree canopy cover where ecologically appropriate. I see Steve's hand and Oliver's. I apologize if I'm getting these out of order, but go ahead, Steve.
I think, yeah, Jen had her hand up
Oh,
first.
okay.
Yeah,
Sorry, Jen. I think
Jen was first.
Thank you for keeping me honest. I can't see my full screen. Go ahead, Jen.
Thanks, no worries. Thanks, Chris. I was just gonna chat in the group. We just slightly changed the verbiage on 2 of these goals just to be consistent. That was what we've kind of all talked about as a group during our last meeting as well. And I can just chat them to you so then Kate can incorporate that. Does that work? Otherwise, it's nothing substantive.
That sounds great. Yeah, it would be good to look at the most up to date. Yeah, that would be helpful. Thanks, Jen.
Okay, that's it. Otherwise, pass off to the next person.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, this is now in the working document for the Climate Informed Forest Management Subcommittee as an objective under the goal of future Whatcom County forests are resilient to climate change. I don't know how we reconcile that. But it strikes me, and Brandy is the expert on this, that this is an objective rather than a goal. But I will defer to those who know better about what an objective is and what a goal is.
Oliver, did you have a different point to raise, or is it related to what Steve just said?
Well, it's a little bit different, but it relates. And I guess what I was going to say is that certainly tree canopy cover is one parameter of what could be considered in forest resilience, but it's also size, class, distribution, species composition, so on and so forth. And so adding ecologically appropriate, if we assume that it includes more than just tree canopy, it includes species composition and age class distribution, then I think that addition is great.
Okay. I'm hearing a lot of support for that. So with the updated language, I'll say, and increased where ecologically appropriate. Carl, I think I saw your hand next.
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to point out there's a yellow sticky down below that says everywhere or just forest lands. And I think that was me last time around, and it was supposed to be under this discussion because I've heard some people talk about when we're talking about forest canopy, we're also including like the city of Bellingham. So are we going to go that deep and look at the city of Bellingham's efforts to maintain forest canopy? Or are we really talking about forest lands?
Okay, so being a little bit more specific about where it looks like we have Whatcom County was updated. So Whatcom County forest and tree canopy, but it's not, indicative of, like you said, forest lands are everywhere. Do you have a suggestion, Carl, for the level of specificity or how to indicate that in this statement?
No, my sense was we were talking about forest lands and not getting into what Blaine is doing or what Lyndon's doing, but I'm not sure everybody agrees with that.
Ellen, do you have a related comment, or is it something a little bit different?
I just feel like we're spinning our wheels when we don't have clear definitions of goals and objectives, going back to Steve's comment. This is a goal, what we want to see in the future? If so, this is an objective. So I'm really confused why we're spending so much time on this if it's really an objective and not a goal. That's all I want to say.
I appreciate that, Ellen. So, Steve, you were saying that this statement is something that you've incorporated into an objective statement. And can you remind me what goal statement that was nested under?
It's the first goal statement of the Climate Informed Forest Management group. And it's been slightly revised, but which is another problem. But future Whatcom County forests are resilient to climate change and provide healthy and sustainable ecosystem services. And so far in the subcommittee, we've identified 8 objectives under that goal, of which increased canopy cover, and we said where practicable, but where ecologically appropriate, I think is probably better. Yeah, that's where it is. It's under the goal of future of Whatcom County forests being resilient to climate change and providing healthy and sustainable ecosystem services.
Okay, thank you. Jen, I see your hand.
Yeah, kind of back to Ellen's point, right, of drafting the goals, and we haven't outlined what exactly those objectives are as a group. We have as a subcommittee, and anybody on stewardship and land use can jump in too, but we have identified a number of objectives underneath this goal statement. I mean, I think it's really important to identify, yeah, we can say we're increasing, but I mean, even to a point of where exactly appropriate and how do we accomplish those, I think there comes with a lot more detail. I would like to propose that we keep it as is, adding where ecologically appropriate makes a lot of sense, especially for just educational purposes of not reforesting everything for everybody. But I also don't want to get too into the details until we have a chance to go over the objectives next month.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jen. I think just taking a step back and pausing for a moment, just to, you know, to remind ourselves of the goals and objectives and the connections between them and where this is headed. So I think it makes sense that some of these are ending up, you know, nested under one another. And I think that, you know, these things are all really related and interconnected. So that makes sense. I think that in keeping with the spirit of the subcommittee's work and thinking about this, that going through this process and making considerations with this as a goal statement, and then to Jen's point, revisiting when we get to the objective stage and making sure that everything fits nicely, that bigger picture thinking will, you know, it'll be more clear when we go through the objective process of where we ultimately want to nest this. But what's important is that at this stage that it's captured here. And I think since, like you mentioned, Jen, the subcommittee is working on what objectives go with that, I think it would be helpful to go through this thought exercise with this here, and then you subcommittees can come together and meld your thinking around this as an objective statement and as a goal statement and find the areas of overlap and then ultimately decide where it lives. But I think I would propose that this Whatcom County forest and tree canopy cover is retained and increased where ecologically appropriate would be the working goal statement, and treat it as a goal statement for now. And then the question would be, is there any modifications related to Carl's comment specifying forest lands or keeping it just as Whatcom County forest and tree canopy cover? So thoughts on that proposal to keep, you know, discussing this as a working goal statement and or any modifications to it. Brandy, go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate your offer that we just retain this right now as a goal statement. And if people are having issues with how the goal statement is structured, that we get some clear guidance on exactly how all the goal statements will be structured so that there's consistency from one subcommittee set of goal statements to the others in terms of how we're structuring the syntax of a goal statement, etc. And I am sitting on the Land Stewardship and Land Use Subcommittee. This is intended to be Whatcom County boundary wide and not just unincorporated Whatcom County and working lands. This committee is looking at the total tree canopy forest cover equation across at a landscape scale and saying we need to have leadership and cooperation and coordination across boundaries to achieve the forest resilience goals and objectives that we have. We can't do it by saying Whatcom County is going to do this and then Blaine will figure out what it's going to do on its own, etc. So this is intended to be landscape scale, boundary to boundary, north, south, east to west, Whatcom County. We're all working together to make sure that tree canopy and forest cover is retained in a healthy condition.
Thank you, Brandy. Chris, or maybe Noah?
Yeah, that was me. Sorry for the noise in the background. This is kind of a 101 level question for me because I'm new to this conversation about goals versus objectives. But just to clarify from my own understanding, these goals are intended to be like long-term target or like long-term results we want to see from this plan. And then the objectives are kind of breaking down specific sub-goals that are more actionable that can get us to that larger goal. Is that correct or?
Yeah, that's right. And the distinction is the objectives are getting into more measurable and like you said, more specific. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so like the goals are not the place to get into the weeds with.
Correct. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll send you, we have just a couple helpful slides from our initial meetings that give some examples and break it down, because I know it's confusing and it can take a couple, read throughs to really get there. So we'll make sure we send those to you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or suggested edits to this goal statement as written? Yeah, Frank? Oh, sorry, Barry, go ahead. I think you probably raised your hand first.
Yeah, I look at this as a lens as retired state environmental planner, and so having dealt with goals, statewide goals, and normally, there's a hierarchy, and at least in planning and regulation, that you have goals, which are the very broad statement, like the green one says future Whatcom County Forest. And then you normally, before you get to objectives, you'll have policies that say, okay, kind of explain that a little bit more. Just what Brandy was saying, that the policy is going to be looking at this in the broadest landscape terms, and you can explain it, including all jurisdictions, or however you want to say it. And then you get down to more of objectives, which are something you can actually measure, and then actions were actually the specific items that implement the objectives. And so it seems like we're just missing that. We're trying to get using the policies. People say policies, they don't mean anything. Well, actually they mean everything, because they're explaining the goal. They're the connection between the goal and your objectives or regulations, if you want to look at it that way. And so it just seems like, we should have some policies in here that's kind of, because otherwise you're going to have to explain what you mean about this goal in the background or introduction to the plan itself. This is what this goal is, but that's what a policy statement does in a quick form. So it just seems like we're missing a complete step in there. I know people don't like to develop policies, but this is why they're important. And when you get to court, and not coming back to my court thing, those policies can actually require developments to do this or not. It's not just like, oh, this is just nice words. They can actually say, the policy is water is prohibited, and if you don't have a water right, period. It's they're enforceable. And they have been enforceable by our courts. So, the policy should be something we agree on if we're looking at landscape. And I agree with Brandy's perspective. I think the policy should be, we're looking at this through a broad landscape lens. And then we may have a policy that separates out, certain kinds of lands, tribal lands or federal lands or private lands. And that just has to be resolved.
So
I hope that helps. I'm trying to help.
Yeah, thanks, Barry. I think if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that what's lacking with the goals and objectives is like an actual policy recommendation that gives it some teeth. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, not in just teeth, but gives it clarity.
Okay.
Because when you read this, future Whatcom County forests are resilient. Okay, it's ambiguous as to what forests we're really talking about.
Okay.
And that's where a policy is not an objective. It's nothing you're going to measure, but it says as a group here, we're going to look at this from a landscape perspective, including all jurisdictions. Okay, that's the policy. Now, and then the objective will come down to the blue box down below, where you want to. The objective is retain and increase where ecologically appropriate. And then how do you do that? Those are the actions that you should put in there. You, whatever, decrease road size or get rid of old roads or whatever it is,
Yeah. Thanks, Barry. I think that makes a lot of sense. What ultimately, as part of the development of this plan, it's not like we'll just have goal statements, objective statements, and action statements. There will be context and text, right, surrounding all of these goal statements and objectives and actions and threats. So I think what I'm hearing is just that these are lacking that currently, and I hear you, and I think that will come. So is it okay if I put a pin in that for now? And that's really helpful that you're flagging the importance of some of that context, and then that's something we can come back to.
Okay, I mean, it's your show. It's not, I've had 50 years of doing this kind of stuff, and I've never done it like this. But I'm old, and you can just carry on any way you want.
I appreciate the comment, Barry. I'm not trying to. I'm just trying to keep us. We're
Yeah,
we've got.
You can put a pin in it. Melanie can put a pin in it. It's fine.
Okay.
I'm just saying, I thought it just might, instead of going around in circles, this might actually give us a kind of a better form direction. But it's up to you and everyone else. I will be quiet now.
Thank you. Thanks, Barry. It's helpful feedback, and I appreciate it. I think I'm just hoping once we have agreement and clarity on our goals moving forward, then we can start to have some of these deeper conversations about some of the context surrounding them. So I think I saw Frank's hand and then Russ. Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, I don't want to keep sounding like beating the horse over and over again, but we're talking about climate change and the effects climate change may have on maintaining a resilient forest within Whatcom County. But on the other hand, you need to address recreational activities also along with climate change, because together they both may impact the ability for the county to maintain their resilient forest. And I don't hear any discussion regarding recreational activities. Thanks.
Thank you, Frank. I think we had recreational goals were, there was a goal statement that we came up with and approved at our last meeting: provide appropriate and sustainably supported recreation opportunities that deliver economic and health benefits to local communities. So that was one goal statement that specifically targets recreation. Do you think that there's something else that is missing that we should discuss as part of these?
Yeah, I just think that it's not only creating the opportunity, but ensuring that the activities aren't being harmful to the ecosystems or water quality or damage to the first foods up there, or affecting the ability of the wildlife being displaced or chased out of their normal habitats, things like that, to be brief.
I don't want to put you on the spot, Frank, but is there a goal statement you have in mind related to that, or is that something we can work with offline to get incorporated to make sure that that's captured?
Yeah, I think we can have a discussion on that, because it's a wide discussion, and it's just beginning to come to light in the last 3 years or so with the state and the feds. And I think Whatcom County needs to be aware that these impacts aren't being addressed on the state and federal level, but they need to also be addressed and incorporated in any management decisions that Whatcom County has taken within their forested lands. Creating recreational opportunities is good for the general public, but what kind of damage is it having on the tribes within Whatcom County? is that being addressed? That's what I don't understand.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear you, Frank. I've made a note. It sounds like the overall, um, you know, very basic goal statement that I'm hearing is limited impacts from recreational activities. And if it's okay with you, just to keep us rolling with the goal statements that we've already got drafted, I'm going to move that down to our kind of working new goal statements, and we can get into a deeper discussion when we get to that section. Is that okay?
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Frank. Russ and then Steve.
Yeah, I think on the goal statement of increasing forest cover, I wanted to make sure that we don't that we're not intending to conflict with the agricultural zoning goals for the county. Converting ag land to forest land has a similar impact to converting ag land to residential in terms of its impact on the economic viability of the agricultural industry. So I wanted to make sure that that's not our intention to convert ag land.
Do you think that where ecologically appropriate covers that, Russ, or do you think there's an additional disclaimer that would...
No, I think it's ecological. It could be ecologically appropriate to convert ag land, but I don't think it's appropriate in terms of agriculture. So it's another word would be, or at least we capture it in our conversation, so we know that wasn't our intent to convert the whole county to forest.
That could be part of the objectives for this subcommittee, perhaps, is to be more
yeah.
there. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Russ. Good point. Steve and then George.
Yeah, I have comments on both of these. In terms of the of increasing canopy cover, I think if it's okay with you, Melanie, we will keep that as an objective under the first goal of the climate informed forest management. It's redundant. It's redundant now, but it will eventually be sorted out when we get everything put together. But if it's okay, we'll keep it, and it'll be in two places, and we'll figure out where it goes. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think that's fine for now, Steve. Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing is about Frank's comment about ensuring against harm from over recreating. And my capacity as a member of the Forest Management Coordination Subcommittee, we are trying to get the record the concerns and ideas of various types of forest owners, including tribal and county and DNR and USFS and commercial and small private. I think I got everybody in there. But you know, on the basis of this, Frank and I had a very long and I think productive conversation about the specific current concerns of the Lummi Nation, and that in that conversation summary, the specific concerns about recreation are covered, so that this will definitely come into the objectives from the Forest Management Coordination Subcommittee. And I've just arranged with George to have a similar conversation about the same topic. So kind of rest assured that and other concerns of tribal owners and also other owners will, specific concerns like that. It may be a little bit early to say that we have them all, but this is part of the process. And I've already spoken too long.
That's great, Steve. Thank you so much for that update. I do think those concerns make sense to come through in the objectives side of things. So thank you for having those conversations and for following up on that. I appreciate it. Go ahead, George.
Okay, good morning. I'm just, to Uncle Frank's point, I'm speaking for Nooksack. I don't know how this is going to fit into all this. It's just my mind's like all over the place this morning. So, I'm looking at the plans and everything and the purpose, but I do have concerns, and I want to know how about the recreational impacts. We have many place names throughout Whatcom County. Each place name, they're specific to what was gathered or what these areas were used for in the past. Up until recently, we've only been protecting historical sites, places that we used in the past. But as the outside populations growing, non-tribal, tribal population still growing, and we're still here, and we're still actively participating in our culture. So we look for potential sites as well that we have to protect, not only historical but potential sites. But with all of these, with the growing population on the outside and us having to accommodate, we're getting claustrophobic, we're getting choked out. With that claustrophobia, we're losing areas to practice our culture. We're losing areas to that we use for meditation, for storage, for cleansing. So I'd like to see, we're not stakeholders, we're first peoples of these lands, and we're always tasked with assisting with land acknowledgements, but those acknowledgements don't come from us. That's for the outside people. We're here. We're not going to write your apology kind of thing. So I would just like to see a little bit more in this that mentions and promotes the cultural presence, our tribal presence. And we're a big part of this. You gotta admit, tribes are a very big part of this. So like I said, a lot of babble. I don't know if I confused or made a problem, but that's all I had to share.
Thank you so much, George, for sharing your thoughts, sharing that really important perspective and that point. I mean, it's I think what I'm hearing from you is that this is really, those considerations are inherent and part of all of these, like all of these statements, everything that we're talking about, right, is in consideration of and directly related to and impacted by and impacting tribal presence and, like you said, cultural activities and all of these places. So I hope, I appreciate you for raising that, George, and if there's anything that we can do as we're going through this exercise to make that clear, and to highlight more directly, I really I think I hear that as feedback for us and something that we can work on. And if there's anything else that you feel feels like it's missing or feels like it needs to be restructured or something that needs to be highlighted in a greater way, I welcome that feedback as well. And I know that's not like a real specific response to your comment, but I think your comment was a little bit more big picture, if I heard you correctly. Thank you, George. Brandy, go ahead.
George and Frank, thanks for your comments. I just wanted to, George, since you went last, I'll just say that the goal statement here that reads local, state, federal, and tribal governments and other stakeholders, maybe we can reframe that a little bit so that it doesn't make the tribes sound like they're a stakeholder, but are working together to align and implement forest management and resilience strategies. I think that this land use subcommittee has, like, we're focused on the topic of land use and stewardship. And we're trying to get at that we want to coordinate across all the interests and jurisdictions in order to get effective stewardship and land use. And so I'm thinking that some of the stuff that you're talking about with regards to the goals on this, from this subcommittee, that we can flesh this out, some of these tribal priorities under this goal statement. And but I also want to just say that we didn't really, I don't remember us talking specifically about recreation in the context of stewardship and land use. And I think it does make sense maybe, for the subcommittee to ask that question about, where does the pressures from recreation fit into the equation of, strategies to address land use pressures and the need for stewardship. So maybe there's a way to loop you guys into the subcommittee discussion where we can try to flesh that out more directly than we have so far. So that was for Frank as well, I think.
Thanks, Brandy. I think that's a really helpful concrete action, is to, dive into this a little bit more as a subcommittee and include George and Frank in that discussion. Is it okay if I move us on to our next goal statement? Any concerns with moving to our next goal statement? Okay, so I believe this purple sticky would be the reworded framing for this goal statement. So forest resilience is improved through active forest land stewardship. Subcommittee members, is that accurate? This would be our working goal statement.
Melanie, can you zoom in a hair?
Of course.
Anyway, to answer your question, Melanie, yes, the purple, at least some of the purples were intended to be the revised goal statements loaded in at the time that we were all doing the mural on the
Great.
9th.
Thank you, Brandy. There were no written edits to this. So I'll just ask now, does anyone have any concerns with this goal statement as written? Not seeing any hands. Not seeing anything. Okay. Let's move on to the next one. Forest benefits are maximized and diversified. And I see some comments to the general nature of this statement. Is it meaningful or is it too general? Is there a desire to specify further? And then another comment on, can forest benefits be defined? So any suggested edits to this goal statement based on those comments? If anyone who made those comments has any suggested changes, that would be great to hear. Yeah, Oliver?
Yeah, I was not involved with developing that goal statement, but I would offer that perhaps replace the word maximized with optimized.
Okay. Forest benefits are optimized and diversified. Any comments or concerns with this goal statement as written?
Yeah.
Steve?
Diversified isn't clear. Does that mean that they serve diverse interests of different groups of people, or does it mean that there's a lot of different benefits? Because it could mean one or the other.
Anyone from the subcommittee have thoughts on that, on the definition, I guess, of diversified?
Yeah, I can chime in a little bit. First, I like the change to optimize instead of diversified. I think that kind of meets the objectives that we're trying to achieve here. And I think the biggest thing was just less of a black and white how forest used to be utilized as just timber products, and looking at what are those other ways that forest can be utilized. So I would say diversified, and it goes really well with the optimized. Steve, I hope that's clarity, but really it's meant to diversify all of the different additional benefits.
Yeah, what about just diverse rather than diversified? You got a diversified benefits sort of, I don't know, it's not clear to me, but if you say diverse benefits, it means it has all kind of different kinds of benefits. I don't know, maybe my etymology is, or my semantics are idiosyncratic, but
What about forest benefits are diverse and optimized?
Sure.
I can't raise my hand right now. This is Tracy. Can I pipe in there?
Yeah, please, Tracy.
Okay, first the statement as originally written was just rankling me because I could just see the 1,000 directions it would go that are polar opposite and very very politicized. However, I love the change optimized. I think that's appropriate, and I think it needs to be the way it was previously written with optimized and diversified. And the reason why is I think that it touches on Steve's point that diversified could be the people that are impacted or the benefits we're getting from the forest. And I think it's both of those things. I also appreciate the order as it was originally written because I think you optimize it thinking about the different diverse ways that you can use it. But I think to just say it's diverse means that I don't know, maybe it implies to me that you're supposed to be using it in a diverse manner, but there are some places where it's not going to be diverse. It's going to be really for whatever, spotted owl habitat or, like Charlie Creek, natural area. We're going to set it completely aside. There's no recreation. There's no entry. There's a lot of reasons why it's not diverse in there. But the landscape is diversified appropriately. So I like the way I like optimized and diversified. That's my vote.
Okay, I'm not going to argue. It just seems like it's a quibble. Sorry.
Thanks, Tracy, and thanks, Steve, for demonstrating. We're reaching consensus here. We're finding points of agreement. Okay, so forest benefits are optimized and diversified. Does this look good? Can we all live with this as written? Move on to the next. Okay, thumbs up. Steve, I think your hand is from your prior statement, I'm guessing. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Steve. Okay, all right. Last one from our original draft goals from the Stewardship and Land Use Subcommittee. Local, state, federal, and tribal governments and other stakeholders are working together to align and implement forest management and resilience strategies. So I put a note just based on the comment from George and Brandy's response that just noting that tribes are not stakeholders. So just being clear that this and other stakeholders is not to indicate that tribal governments are stakeholders. But any suggested edits or comments on this goal statement? Yes, Jen.
Hey, thanks. And thanks for that reminder, Brandy and George. So I think the intent for this was really kind of listing out some to be consistent for goal statements across, but really not limiting. As you list out people involved, do you always exclude accidentally? So I think just instead of putting other stakeholders, just putting others accomplishes that just fine.
Great suggestion, Jen.
Maybe another friendly amendment would be local, state, federal, and tribal governments, and then comma, stakeholders, and then comma, and others.
Okay. Noah, yeah.
Yeah, this might be like too much of a little quibble, but does anyone have any opposition to changing "are working" to just the word "work"? Like just shorter, punchier, a little more grammatically correct, and it's like a continued long-term future desired outcome.
Yeah, I think that works with the consistency. Any opposed to that edit? Okay, local, state, federal, and tribal governments, stakeholders, and others work together to align and implement forest management and resilience strategies. Yeah, Steve?
I have, this grammar implies that local, state, and federal governments are not stakeholders either. Right? Local, state, and federal governments, local, state, federal, and tribal governments, bang, that's one category. Stakeholders, that's the second category. What is a stakeholder and why do we need it in there at all? How is a stakeholder defined? I don't think, this is a kind of customary thing that people use in recent policy discussions. But is there a way to, I mean, does it need to be there?
Thanks, Steve. I think I'll just, we've got 10 minutes left. I'm going to suggest we not open up the discussion of, what is a stakeholder right now. However, I hear your point of whether it's necessary in this statement. So I think an original suggestion was just to have "and others," local, state, federal, and tribal governments and others. So if we're not getting into specifics, I think the question is, do we need to have broader statements like this, or does "and others" capture it? So Jen, go ahead.
Yeah, can I just add that there were others that we already approved, I think, that has this verbiage. So it might be a good opportunity just for the next meeting is to revisit that part of it and just stick with the rest of it for now, call that good, because we're going to need to revisit those other ones we already kind of approved as well to capture this.
Yeah, when we're talking about, really what we're talking about is partners, right, are working together. And so if we can agree on the best way to frame that and what level of specificity, I think you're right, it'll be, there are a few other goal statements that follow this same model.
Yeah. And if I may, I
Yeah,
would
go
like
ahead, Brandy.
emphasis to not be overly on government. I think it's really important to pull in all of the stakeholders, all of the partners into this equation to get the to scale up the kind of results that we need to scale up.
Can I make a suggestion for now, and then we can revisit this for all the goal statements, but maybe it's local, state, federal, and tribal partners. And that's it. And this all,
I don't want that goes against what we were trying to do at the subcommittee, which is we're not just talking about government, we're talking
right. We'd remove government. It would just say local, state, federal, and tribal partners, and that's to encapsulate just like all different groups.
Maybe.
Okay.
I'd need to sit on it a little bit.
Okay.
I don't personally have a problem with the word stakeholder, and the only reason that I suggested the change is because I know that in other venues, I have heard tribal members take umbrage with the term stakeholder being applied to them. So I think it's important to address that they are a government. And once you do that, you need to start talking about other types of groups other than government.
Right. Okay. If we remove stakeholders here, and then we know that we're going to revisit this language, it sounds like people would prefer to sit and think about that. So unless there are concerns with, let's focus on any other comments or questions or suggestions related to the rest of this statement, and know that we're going to revisit the way we are referencing government, stakeholders, other partners as a whole in these statements. So Steve, something related to the rest of the statement and not the government stakeholders, others
Oh,
piece.
Okay, I pass it.
Okay, is that okay? I think it sounds like folks would like to think about that a little bit more deeply and revisit that. Okay, comments or concerns related to the rest of this goal statement? Work together to align and implement forest management and resilience strategies. Okay. Well, we've got just a few minutes left, and the way I'd like to discuss the draft goals that came out of our last discussion is to ask everybody in your meeting packet, and I can pull them up on the screen too, is to make sure that we're considering whether or not these goal statements are already captured in the adopted goal statements in the goal statements that we adopted at our last meeting. So are you all seeing the adopted goals from December 9th on the screen right now? Okay. So here are the 9 adopted goals. I'm just going to pause for a minute. I'll zoom in and just give everybody a chance to read through these.
Can you make it a little bigger?
I can. How's
Thank
that?
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Melanie, what are we looking for as we read these? I'm sorry, I'm not understanding.
Just refamiliarizing yourself with them so that when we go and look back at the draft goals that came out of our discussion at our last meeting, you have these fresh in your mind. And the purpose is to make sure that any new goals that we're adding into the discussion are unique from these adopted goals that we adopted at the last meeting. I'll scroll down. There's one more that's off the page. There we go. Okay. Everyone have a chance to read through these. These are in your packet as well. I just wanted to give everyone a chance to refamiliarize yourselves. So going back to the mural, we had a few statements that were suggested. One was future generations enjoy the benefits of healthy forest ecosystem services. Are there any comments or suggestions related to this additional goal statement? And again, these are statements that individual task force members came up with as we were reviewing the draft goal statements that subcommittees developed. Yeah, Oliver?
Yeah, I just a suggested word change. Rather than healthy forest, how about resilient forest ecosystem services?
Okay. Jen?
Yeah, my apologies. I don't remember discussing this one last time, or if it just kind of came up. I can't remember how much discussion was around this, but I kind of wonder of just thinking about a goal statement and then a list of objectives underneath. I wonder if the idea of just the future generations piece and the benefits can be incorporated as objectives under existing goal statements. Because I'm just trying to conceptualize, what do objectives look like under this goal statement that are not going to be incorporated elsewhere? And I'm having a hard time picturing that.
Okay, so suggestion from Jen is to adapt this into an objective. And this, Jen, these are goal statements that we didn't have a chance to discuss as a full group. So that your recollection of is correct that we didn't have a chance to dive into it. Are there others in favor of adapting this as an objective? Oh, go ahead, Brandy.
I do think that there is a lot of literature to support and speak to this as a goal statement. I just don't know right now if it makes sense to subsume it in some other goal statement or as an objective. It's hard to answer for me to answer a question like that until I start to see everything collated. But
Okay.
that being said, I do think that that people getting the benefit of a healthy landscape and a resilient landscape, which forests are directly related to human health and well-being, and the performance, you know, the metrics there are indisputable about what trees and forests do for people. So just psychologically, health-wise, et cetera. So I think it's an important piece of the equation. I just don't know how it fits right now, if it's a standalone goal or if it's nested under other goals and priorities. And I'd be loath to lose it right now until we've had a chance to think comprehensively that way.
Okay. Thank you, Brandy. I think what I'm hearing, just based on, you know, discussion around this, is that what would be potentially more helpful is for these new goal statements that haven't had the benefit of being talked through in subcommittees, is that these go to subcommittee discussions as you're discussing objectives. And then the subcommittees can work with them and see, as you're forming your objectives, if some of these statements fit better in that category, or if you feel like they could be elevated to a draft goal statement. And then you as subcommittees workshop the language before we go to the broader group. How does that proposal sound for next steps for some of these? Because I think it sounds like you'd like a little bit more time to chew them over. I saw a thumbs up from Jen. Others, does that sound okay? Okay, thanks, Abe. All right, Russ. Okay, good. Well, in that case, let's go back to the goal statements that we just reviewed. And I think what would be great is if you all felt comfortable, we could formalize these 4 goal statements. Whatcom County forest and tree canopy cover is retained and increased where ecologically appropriate. Local, state, federal, and tribal governments, this section to be edited and adapted to be consistent with all their goal statements. And others work together to align and implement forest management and resilience strategies. Forest resilience is improved through active forest land stewardship, and forest benefits are optimized and diversified. Any consideration or thoughts about formalizing and adopting these 4 goal statements?
I move to adopt the 4 goal statements on our screen.
I'll second.
Any further discussion on these 4 goals? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, Ms. Melanie.
Thank you all. Thanks so much for going through that process. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and in our final 5 minutes, I think Kate would just like to remind us of our meeting schedule and our next meeting. Yeah, subcommittee next steps briefly before we adjourn. So go ahead, Kate.
Thanks, everyone. Great work today. Just quick reminders to what we talked about really at the beginning of the meeting, which is our next task force meeting will be February 10th. And the purpose of that meeting will be to get into our objective statements that you all have already been working on with your subcommittees, I believe you all have recurring subcommittee meetings scheduled. And if you do not, or if you have questions about that, please get in touch with Chris, and you're welcome to loop myself and Melanie on those messages too, just to make sure you all are getting the support you need to get those scheduled ahead of our February 10th meeting. And then, of course, you will see an email from me with just action items and our decisions from today, either tomorrow or Wednesday. And you can also expect just a little flag noting when we've closed the community survey. I did see, I think someone had a question in the chat of like when exactly the survey will close. And because that's manually closed by me, it'll be probably the afternoon of Friday as I'm closing up my work day. So just keep that in mind as you're reaching out to your folks, to just like urge them to submit the survey before Friday if they can. And I think with that, does anyone have any final thoughts or questions? Chris, anything else you'd like to note?
I don't think so. Thanks everyone for attending and participating, and we'll follow up via email and in subcommittee. With that, we'll adjourn 3 minutes early.
Melanie, this is Frank here.
Hi, Frank.
Hey, or was that you that mentioned that you was going to contact me to set up a date to discuss with for future discussions on what we had talked about, or was that somebody else that?
We can definitely follow up, Frank, and I'd like to follow up with you. I think also Brandy had noted that she would reach out to you and George to include you in their subcommittee's discussion.
Yes, because I was wondering when you set up that date for a discussion with me, can you also send the invite out to George, my nephew George up in Nooksack, so we can both participate in that discussion together?
I will do that as part of our follow-up, Frank, and then Brandy, I think that was your plan as well. Is that right?
Yeah, I think we should just add you guys, Frank, to the subcommittee meeting schedule. I think one of you might already be on there, but I can't remember. But just so that we can take up that question of how better to represent your concerns about recreation in the structure of the subcommittee's goal statements.
Yeah, to clarify.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that Georgie would be involved in those discussions.
Yeah, we'll definitely, yes, we'll definitely do that. Both you and George, for sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Jen, what were you going to say though, Jen?
Yeah, I was just going to clarify. Trevor is on the subcommittee. I already have a note to make sure if see if he can or not attend. And Brandy, I'm happy to follow up with George and Frank as needed, or even through Trevor to make sure there's representation at the next meeting.
That's great. Thanks.
Perfect. And we don't have a specific scheduled date yet, Frank, just FYI, because I noted there was some issues with where the second Monday versus Wednesday kind of lie in relation to each other in the next coming months. We'll get that sorted out.
Yeah, the best day for me is on Fridays. Fridays I leave kind of open for stuff like this. So just FYI.
All right. Thanks again, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks all. Have a good week. Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you,
Take care.
everybody.